Well, that's what I was thinking. Another thing that puts Michigan in a good place is just the fact that we do have a lot of the biomass, not only the woods and forests, and obviously we want to treat that right, and you've already indicated that, but some of this biomass comes from waste on farms or farm animals, and certainly we have a good share of farms, and so they're producing biomass as we speak, I guess.
Absolutely, and let's not forget our cities and municipalities. The municipal solid waste, MSW as it's often called, can be turned into a biogas, and in fact there are some pilot programs going on right now in the state to figure out ways to do that. And again, currently it's a problem. Our municipalities are paying to get rid of it, basically. We're landfilling it in most cases someplace. Imagine a future in which we could take that stuff and extract value from it. And it would probably be a gas, sort of like LPG or propane, that we could burn for heat or energy. So again, an immense opportunity. And sometimes it would be the farms and the municipalities getting together. We might actually want to mix those two materials, the farm waste, the animal waste, with something from the cities, and again, get a better value proposition from an economic standpoint.
Well, I have to say, Steve, that I never thought several years ago that we'd be talking about using waste in such a way and not wasting waste. But technology helps us to continue to move forward, so that's great. And speaking of that, obviously you're with Michigan State, and Michigan State is heavily involved in taking a lead in developing this bioeconomy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we've been very, very active. And we're not active in a vacuum. We are really creating partnerships with other institutions in the state. But what we were really pleased a year and a half ago to, with a partner in Wisconsin, receive a very large grant from the Department of Energy in Washington. And that's a research grant to remove some of the bottlenecks that are currently in the way of turning biomass into energy in an economic sense. And so we have a huge amount of research going on right now. I like to talk in terms of how much we spend a month, and that's $900,000. It's a huge amount of money. It's federal funds flowing into MSU, into the state, to really address some of these issues. On the other hand, or sort of balancing that off, we've been very involved just in the last 4 or 5 months working with MEDC and the state of Michigan to try to attract some companies to the state who would like to come here and invest and set up operations of various sorts, but which have questions. There are some things about the supply of materials or how they might reduce prices in the future, the kind of questions that firms often ask. We've been asked to come in and help answer those questions on a very, very fast time frame, and we're doing that as well. So the big federal grant, we talk about years and years and long-term things, but we're also trying to be responsive to the needs of the state that are immediate.
Well, that's great, and for perhaps our listeners who may not know all of the acronyms, MEDC is Michigan Economic Development Corporation. That's kind of the economic development arm for the state of Michigan.
That's right.
Now, you mentioned a couple of things, really working to develop this bioeconomy, and we talked earlier about the fact that right now some of these the biomass and turning it into useful material, it may not be very cost effective to use. And so I know there's so many things with technology. When they first come out, they're higher priced, and then pretty soon, they're pretty inexpensive. Do you have any thoughts, any ideas? I know this is a tough question, but how long might we start to see some of this biomass turn into things that we can actually use for a reasonable price?
Yeah, that's a very hard question to answer because there are really two variables in that question. One of them is the price, the cost of producing the alternative fuels. And then there's how much would the competition cost, that is to say, the regular gas that we get now. And they're both going to fluctuate. I think we're going to see in the next 4 to 5 years the beginning of renewable transportation fuels, gas and diesel fuel, entering the market. That will depend a lot on policy issues, and particularly in Washington, because most of those issues are addressed there. But it sure looks to me, when I get out and I talk to people around the state, that our interest in developing this industry is very, very high, and it's not going to go away. I'm old enough to remember the oil shock in the 1970s. You're probably not, but
You're very kind, but no, I'm with you.
And you remember we lined up at the gas pump, or some days we couldn't buy gas, and we said we'd never do that again. And we invested a lot of money in research and development, and really had a kind of national desire to not allow that to happen again. But frankly, we lost our will to do that in the early 1980s, and we went right back where we started from. And we need to be very careful this time around. And back to our conversation a few moments ago about the temporary reduction in gas prices. That shouldn't lull us into a sense of false security. And so we're certainly, speaking for Michigan State, we're in it for the long haul. And I really believe that the elected officials, such as yourself in Michigan and others, understand that we need to make some long-term investments, keep at some things, push that ball up the hill, and ultimately that's going to have an immense positive impact on our state.
Steve, I agree. I think that America is a wonderful place, but sometimes we have a very short memory. And we react to things passionately initially, and then it seems like we get back to life, and sometimes they're not forgotten, but they're just not on that top shelf anymore. The oil crisis back then, you're right, we lived through that. We understand it. We knew what it was to wait in the gas lines, and gas was a lot cheaper back then, but we were waiting in the gas lines.
Seemed expensive back then.
Yes. And we understood that. Of course, it's fresh in our mind now, thinking of $4 plus a gallon from last summer, but already. And here's something I noticed, that there were a lot fewer of the large trucks and SUVs on the road. It seems like it was hard to sell them. And it's not that we don't build wonderful vehicles, but sometimes I just wonder if we forget almost too quickly and begin to go back to our old ways. I think about the 9/11 and how horrific that was, and how we all drew together and helped each other. I can still remember that time, and it seems like we forget so easily. We go back to our lives, and now we complain about the security at the airlines, which, I admit, when I fly, I like to just fly and
yeah, it can drive you crazy, but there's a reason
but it's
for doing
necessary,
it.
and so I'm thankful for it. So there are many things that we seem to forget, and I think part of the problem is when you're really stretched for funds, and you have a cheaper alternative that's right here. There's a tendency to just go with that, and maybe invest very little in a higher priced alternative that could become less expensive. But we have to remember, I think that foreign companies are really starting to own much of America, and we have so much money going to pay for foreign oil.